After 3 days of rain, Marcus Hill's new farm looked less like farmland than a shallow lake. Water covered the old corn rows from the leaning barn to the lower fence. Last year's stalks rose through the surface like thin brown reeds. Tractor tracks had disappeared beneath mud, and the lowest corner of the property had become deep enough to reflect the grey morning sky. Marcus walked along the fence in tall rubber boots, testing the ground with a wooden pole. Almost everywhere, the pole sank easily. Then he noticed one narrow strip where the surface looked different. It began near an old apple tree and ran almost perfectly straight toward the overgrown drainage ditch. The soil was still wet, but less water stood there than on either side. The line was too even to be natural. Marcus followed it slowly. Halfway across the field, his boot struck something hard beneath the mud. He reached down and pulled free a curved piece of orange-brown clay. It looked like part of a broken pipe. Near the ditch, he found more fragments. They all pointed toward a dark round opening hidden beneath grass, roots, and fallen leaves. A few drops of muddy water escaped from it. Before we return to the beginning, subscribe if you enjoy stories about people who find old answers beneath land everyone else has given up on. 2 months earlier, Marcus had bought the abandoned property at a county tax sale for $3,200. The farmhouse was already gone. The barn leaned toward the field. Weeds filled the old equipment lane, and no crop had grown there for years. Everyone in the area knew why the price was so low. Every spring, the field flooded. Rainwater remained for days or sometimes weeks. Equipment sank into the lower ground. Seeds rotted before they could establish roots. When Calvin, a neighboring farmer, saw Marcus beside the sale sign, he laughed and pointed toward the water standing among the weeds. "You did not buy a farm," he said. "You bought a pond without fish." Marcus did not answer. He looked across the flooded field and wondered why one straight strip always seemed to dry first. Marcus began at the ditch. He cut tall grass, pulled away branches, and removed a thick layer of wet leaves. Beneath the roots, the dark circular opening became clearer. It was the end of an old clay drainage pipe. The pipe was not one long piece. It had been built from short-fired clay cylinders laid end to end beneath the soil. Small gaps between the sections allowed water from the surrounding ground to enter and move downhill toward the ditch. Marcus followed the direction of the outlet back into the field. The pipe disappeared beneath several feet of soil, so he marked its likely path with wooden stakes instead of digging up the entire farm. An elderly neighbor remembered the system. Many decades earlier, the previous farming family had installed clay drainage lines by hand. When they worked, the lower field became firm enough to plant before the surrounding wet ground. After the farm was abandoned, the ditch filled with vegetation. Roots entered the outlet. Heavy machinery may have crushed several sections underground. Marcus cleaned the exposed end carefully. At first, nothing happened. Then a thin stream of brown water began running from the pipe. It was not much, but it continued for hours. The next morning, the narrow strip through the field looked slightly darker and firmer than the surrounding ground. Calvin drove past and saw Marcus standing knee-deep in the ditch beside a pile of broken clay. He laughed again. "A few old pipes will not dry that lake," he said. Marcus kept clearing the outlet. The dry strip slowly lengthened, but then stopped near the center of the property. Above that point, water remained unchanged. Something underground had blocked the line completely. Marcus waited until the surface became firm enough to dig. Then he opened the ground where the dry strip ended. Several feet below the surface, Marcus found the clay line. The first sections were intact. Farther ahead, the pipe had collapsed. Broken pieces lay mixed with dense soil and thick roots. The damaged section was short. Marcus believed the repair would be simple. He removed the fragments and placed a new pipe between the surviving ends. Then he packed heavy clay tightly around it, believing the firm soil would keep everything from shifting. For 2 days, the field appeared to improve. Then a moderate rain arrived. Water moved through the old line until it reached Marcus's repair. The replacement pipe sat slightly higher than the original sections, and the packed clay around it gave water almost no place to enter or escape. Pressure built upstream. A few yards away, the surface began to sink. By morning, a round muddy hole had formed in the field. Water bubbled through the soil and collected around it like a small spring. Instead of carrying water away, Marcus had forced it back to the surface. Calvin stood beside the fence and looked at the new hole. "Now your farm is making its own ponds," he said. Marcus did not respond. He reopened the trench. This time, he checked the slope between the surviving clay sections. He lowered the replacement so water would continue moving downhill without climbing over the connection. Instead of sealing it inside dense clay, Marcus placed small clean stones around the pipe. The stones gave groundwater space to reach the line while supporting the repaired section. He returned the soil gently rather than packing it into a hard wall. At the ditch, he reinforced the outlet with larger stones so the flowing water would not wash away the bank. After the next light rain, a steady stream ran from the clay opening. The sunken hole did not refill. The darker strip extended farther into the field. It was the first real improvement, but Marcus had repaired only one short break. Most of the farm still remained wet. Then the forecast warned of another heavy storm. Rain reached the farm after sunset. It struck the old barn roof, filled the tractor ruts, and spread across the lower field. Within an hour, water covered the dark strip Marcus had been watching. From the edge of the property, the repair appeared to have changed nothing. Marcus stayed near the barn. There was no reason to walk across saturated ground during lightning, especially above an old drainage line that might collapse without warning. For a while, all he heard was rain. Then another sound rose from the ditch. Running water. Marcus aimed his flashlight toward the clay outlet. A strong muddy stream poured from the opening, carrying small root fragments and dark particles. The buried line was full. Water still stood across the field, but it began dropping first along the straight path between the old apple tree and the ditch. The change was slow. The field did not empty in minutes. It remained soaked throughout the night. By morning, however, a long strip of dark soil had appeared where shallow water had stood before. On either side, the untreated ground remained covered. The system had not survived without damage. Higher in the field, a new wet patch appeared above another crack section. Part of the underground flow was escaping there. Near the ditch, the strong outlet stream loosened several support stones and cut into the bank. Marcus waited until the storm passed before entering the field. He reset the stones and marked the new wet area for a later repair. For several more days, the untreated side remained too soft to cross. The restored strip became firm enough to walk first. It did not prove that the entire property could be saved. It showed that the water had once been given a route beneath the field. Marcus only had to keep finding it. Marcus did not try to drain the whole farm in one summer. He did not have enough money to replace every buried pipe, and no map showed where the old branches ran. Instead, he watched the field after each rain. The places that dried first revealed the direction of the underground system. Where a dark strip ended suddenly, Marcus looked for another broken section. He repaired the original line and one short branch near the apple tree. The lowest corner remained wet. Another section had probably collapsed beyond anything he could afford to restore that year. The ditch also needed regular clearing because grass, branches, and leaves quickly blocked the outlet. But the central strip changed. For the first time, the soil became firm enough to support a small tractor. Marcus planted soybeans there and left the neighboring wet ground untouched for comparison. The crop was modest. Several plants yellowed after another storm. One section of soil settled above the old pipe and needed filling. The edges of the planted strip remained too wet. Still, the soybeans survived long enough to produce the first harvest the field had seen in years. Calvin visited after the beans were cut. A straight line of stubble crossed the low field while weeds and standing moisture remained around it. This time, Calvin did not laugh. "How did you know where to dig?" he asked. Marcus picked up a broken piece of fired clay and pointed toward the strip that had dried before everything else. "The field showed me," he said. The following spring, Marcus continued repairing the system one section at a time. He did not promise to turn every wet corner into perfect cropland. He simply reopened the path that earlier farmers had built beneath the soil. After a quiet rain, Marcus stood beside the drainage ditch. Clear water flowed steadily from the old clay outlet. Behind him, much of the property still looked dark and heavy. But one long dry strip crossed the field. The farm had never needed someone to defeat the water. It had needed someone to give the water its old road back.